This panel is, can crossover fit the crime? Um, I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll have our other panelists introduce themselves. Um, I just want to say that I am a author of crime and speculative fiction, which kind of makes me appropriate for this panel. I started off writing speculative fiction and realized that I wrote a lot of mystery and crime into it, and was invited to contribute to a crime anthology. So I wrote a straight crime story, decided I liked that too. And so now I'm writing crime novels. I'll have a few things to say during this discussion. Chris, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Chris Patrick Carolan, a writer based in Calgary, Alberta. My first novel, The Nightshade Cabal, was released earlier this year. It's a paranormal steampunk murder mystery, which sounds like a mouthful, and yes, it is a mouthful. But yeah, I try to blend detective crime elements with steampunk and the paranormal in my work.
Excellent. Lisa.
Well, I'm a Toronto-based author, and I'm originally from South Africa, because generally people always say yes, but you don't sound very Canadian. And I publish with Inanna Publications, and this is my 10th novel that will be coming out. Let me hold it up nice and big. It's called The Rage Room, and this is my first jaunt into speculative fiction. Before that, my previous 9 novels were all various literary novels crossed over into crime. So that's why I think I'm also perfect for this panel, because I've pretty much done crossover from the beginning.
Nice. Caro.
Yes, well, I'm also based in Toronto, and I write all sorts of different genres. I'm one of those people that agents just hate, because they want you to stay put and do something sensible, like write a series, but no. However, I think that that's one reason why I am on this panel. I have coming out very soon, and it's actually out already in an ebook format, a SF police procedural. So it's basically the format of a police procedural, and it's called Marlowe's Dance, by the way. I don't know if you can see it, it's up here, but I don't have a cover yet to wave around. And so it's actually the format of a police procedural, and except it's located in my world of Merculian, where all the other books are. I've written a whole bunch of books with these characters, which are sort of the happy, relatively jolly hermaphrodites on Merculian. And a lot of them are into the arts. They're really, really arty types. So that was my first time of actually setting out to combine the two things. A lot of the other SF books are more like sort of thrillers or political thrillers and all that sort of thing, all the rest of the series. But this one is slightly different, the Marlowe's Dance one. So that's sort of, as I say, I'm also actually have a book coming out from Inanna Publications at the same time as Lisa, but it isn't actually either SF or a mystery, so I just won't talk about it now.
Nice. Well, thank you. It sounds like it's going to be a interesting blend of perspectives here. Everyone's got a different background, but we're all doing it wrong, right? If you actually want to be a successful author, you're supposed to pick one easily understood genre and cater to that market. Is that not what we're supposed to be doing? So I'm going to ask all of us here, why did we decide not to go that route? Why are we not writing cozy mysteries? Or are we not writing hard science fiction? Why are we writing this crossover blend? Who wants to go first?
Well, I can answer that from my perspective, at least. I've always been a world builder, and I would spend hours and hours writing the histories of fantasy worlds and science fiction worlds and crazy inventions. And then I get to the part where I had to write the story, and something has to happen or you don't have a story. So, it just felt natural to me when I developed the paranormal steampunk world that I write in. It just kind of happened that, eventually they have to stumble across a body. Something has to happen to make a story happen. So crime just fit the world that I write in.
Nice. Anybody else?
Well, okay, so I can go next. Okay, well, now I've forgotten the question.
So the question is why are you writing crossover instead of a straight, easily understood genre?
Okay, well, you see, I tried it the other way. It didn't really work. I really have tried everything, including a Harlequin romance. And I got this interesting letter back from them saying, well, we do love the writing, but you have obviously never read any of our books. That was that. I did try again, and they said it's better, but still, you really can't have our lead character as a ballet dancer. That won't work. So, all right, then fine, I'll do it the way I really want to do it. And so some of them came out as sort of literary novels. Some of them came out as coming out novels. Some of them came out as very soft science fiction. There's no way I could write hard science fiction because there's absolutely no science whatsoever in my science fiction books. Things just happen because that's the way it works on this planet. So there. So, I mean, that's really why I developed this world with the kind of people that I wanted to write about. And the whole planet is heavily into the arts, which apparently is something my agent told me ages ago, you just stay away from when you're actually writing books to sell. So I thought, well, the heck with that. I'm just going to do it my way.
Excellent. Lisa?
For me, I really, really tried to write straight genre. I really did. And like Caro, I also wrote a Harlequin romance novel. Actually, when I was 14, I decided I was going to do this, and it really went nowhere. And I've also tried really, really hard to write the straight genre novels, but my novels always address, I made some notes, they always address some sociological issue that's going on. So it could be, there's always something socio-political or with regards to a self-identity or relationships or marriages, homelessness, gender, family, situation in South Africa. So there's always something that I'm feeling very passionate about at that moment. And then the book kind of comes from there. And then the crime becomes a vehicle for that. And for the Rage Room, to be honest, which is more leaning towards hard sci-fi, which I'm going to admit nearly killed me doing it. And Chris, I take my hat off to you doing this all the time. This one's got time travel. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. And fortunately for me, I had this really good friend of mine. We were working together. My day job, I'm a graphic designer, and so I mined his brain, and I kept sending him copies of the manuscript, and he kept sending it back and saying, "No, the tech isn't right. The tech isn't right." So for me, I had to make the tech work in the Rage Room. Meanwhile, for me, it's mainly a book about consumerism and politics that are happening at the moment. So that was why I set out to write it. And for me, looking at the world is I feel like there's so much anger. If you look at online posts, people react with such vicious anger. You get anything wrong, or you say something and then you're just jumped on. So I wanted to talk about this anger, and it seemed like the vehicle for it was a science fiction novel, but I was not keen on doing it. So there, in a very long nutshell, is how it evolved.
I like your answers. They're similar to mine. I write what my gut tells me to write. I would really love for it to line up with marketing and distribution and sales, but it doesn't seem to happen that way. So all of us are pretty much writing our story and not worrying too much about how the world's going to find it, rather than trying to conform and writing on demand. Yeah. To what the world's looking for. Caro, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think what Lisa was really talking about was theme.
Yes.
Yes.
which is what sort of moves you to sort of move into whatever way that it's going to go. And I think, I certainly, all of these things, even though some of these books have their very funny moments, all of them looking back are all about things like prejudice and identity and coming to terms with things in your past and all of these things. But one does have to have a plot, as Chris was saying, you have to hang it on something.
So, Lisa, you mentioned time travel. I just want to let you know that once this pandemic is over, I have a time travel crime series coming out.
Oh, excellent.
It was supposed to launch this weekend, but my publisher has pushed some stuff off due to the pandemic, so it's going to be next August. But yeah, time travel is tricky. Trying to live within the constraints while enforcing constraints is what I found difficult. It's like, what are my time travel rules? Because you pretty much have to make them up.
And it can be really tempting to break them to fit the needs of the story, or just to make the story easier to write, I should say, not fit the needs of the story. But you absolutely cannot break the rules that you have set up.
No.
Your reader would throw the book across the room and never look at anything with your name on it again, and be right to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Chris. Because I kept sort of thinking like maybe because my good friend's name is Colin Frings, and I would hope that I would sort of something would sneak by him. Man, he was like precious. And then I'd say to him, "But this is fiction," and he's like, "No, you have to get this right." And it was terrible. I'm never doing time travel again. It was horrible.
So I'm going to make a highly debatable statement right now. And then I'd like you all to respond to it. And that statement is this. Mystery is not a genre because almost all writing has mystery in it.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me get into this one.
We can argue for it or against it. Just what do you have to say?
What you say is true, the second part, but not the first part. Because if you're actually going to write a book which might be called a genre book, then part of that book has to be accentuated. So if you think of a regular novel as sort of a round thing, like an orange, say, if you decide to write a genre novel, it's going to change the shape because you are going to accentuate one part of it. So a mystery novel in a genre will have the emphasis on the mystery. Whereas a regular book, there will be a mystery involved because that's what story is, to find out what's going to happen, and it's mystery, whatever happened to your grandmother back in whatever. But it's not involving sleuthing particularly. And it's also the way it's written. It wouldn't be written quite the same way. That's sort of just a couple of things. So what do you think about that, Lisa?
I totally agree with you. And might I say, I just want to add for listeners out there that many, many years ago, I attended a panel at the Bloody Words conference. And thanks to Caro, that was how I plotted West of Wawa. So I love being on panels with Caro because I always learn something. And so it's an amazing experience. Yes, I agree. I think that I've been tempted to try because I thought the most difficult thing for me is when people say to me, "What do you write?" And then I absolutely freeze. And then you've lost them. They look at you like you're an idiot because you've just behaved like an idiot because you don't know what your books are. But it's the hardest thing to come up with. And then you're worried you're going to get it wrong because if you say, it has mystery elements, it's a sociological novel, but it has mystery elements. No one's interested in that. They want the snappy thing, right? So yes, I think that's where I totally fall on my face, describing the books in a snappy way.
Yeah, you really have to boil a description down to 4 or 5 words at most. When you have those encounters, you need to be able to say, my book is a paranormal steampunk murder mystery. Just put those words together and you get an idea of what it is. But if I describe my book as an exploration of the unintended consequences of an innovative technology, you start to lose people the longer you go on. And then you start throwing steampunk trappings, and there's wizards and maybe a werewolf, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, So yeah, you really need to be able to boil it down to just a couple of words to keep people's attention.
But you're describing one book. The rest of us have multiple books.
Oh yeah.
And
Like,
that's where it gets difficult.
Yep.
Like, I might answer that question is, what do you want me to write? Oh, yes, I've written that.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Yeah, so Caro jumped right on the correct answer to that proposal. I was hoping it would take longer to get there, but we got there pretty quick.
Sorry.
Can I just say that I was really impressed with Chris when you introduced yourself and you were so succinct, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch this recording of this later and emulate exactly like what you said. Like this, you introduced your book and it was like, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So yeah.
Well, I'd been boiling that pitch down for a couple of years. It took me about 3 years to shop the novel and find a publisher for it. And I actually eventually ended up selling the novel through Twitter. It was a
Really?
It was a tweet that got me my publishing deal.
But what do they call those tweet pitch?
Pitch Madness. It's
Pitch
called
Madness,
Pitch Madness.
yeah.
It happens, I think, 3 times a year, and you sum up your novel in a tweet with your comp titles and attach a couple of hashtags. Editors and publishers and agents are on Twitter that day looking for projects they're interested in. And I know a couple of people who have secured book deals through Pitch Madness. So it's definitely worth looking into if you've got a finished manuscript ready to shop.
My understanding is today that's one of the best ways to market a manuscript.
Really?
If you don't have an agent, that is like, jump on that, because that's just an amazing approach.
Yep. And I got interest from a couple of agents. And
Neither have I, but I'm not on Twitter much.
Well, go on Twitter and just look for hashtag Pitch Madness, and it'll come back telling you when the next one's going to be. I'm not sure the best way to find them out, but I have seen them. I haven't participated.
Well, things are so different now. It's awfully, and they're changing so fast. I mean, I never heard of this. Lisa never heard of it. But Lisa, you're much more active on Twitter than I am, so I'm surprised you didn't hear about it.
I generally go on and just post strange things and like other people's things and then wander off. So I find a lot of the time I go on social media more for the connection with friends than to be sort of like marketing the book or looking for book things per se. Because sometimes you just get tired of that, right? Because it's like an ocean or a tsunami, actually. And so I feel instantly like wearied and deflated when, I see all these options out there and what people are doing, and it's almost like a piranha frenzy. So I'm more on Instagram, I love, and it's definitely for me more like I hang out with I don't hang out because I sort of flit on and off, which kind of suits my personality. I like to come and go. And it's more for the friends thing than the book thing. So, but I think what's interesting as well, Chris, is like to even think, how would I describe this book if I were to tweet about it? Because that's like the purest like condensation of what I need to say about this thing, right? So that's really a good point.
Yeah, to boil a book down to less than 2 sentences. It's crazy, but it works.
We just received a suggestion in chat that we should all put our Twitter handles into chat.
Good thinking.
And address it to everybody. That way people will know how to find us on Twitter.
Oh dear. This is the first time I'm doing this with my MacBook, so things are changed. All right, where do I find this? Dumpty dumpty dump.
There's a little chat thing at the bottom.
Yeah, where it says chat. You just click on chat, it'll open up a box. And in there you can address, you click on to, and under there you say to everyone. And then you type in your Twitter handle below.
Oh, good. Chris is on Instagram too. I love Instagram. I like Instagram. One can really be your I can be my most irreverent self, the pictures that I see or comments and things. I find Instagram generally less judgmental than Facebook, which I find quite judgmental. Facebook actually scares me.
I agree with that, yeah.
About Facebook, a lot of people have problems with what is on Facebook, but you have a lot of control over what you see. If you don't like what one of your friends is posting, you can block them. If it's one of their friends who's not one of your friends, you can actually block any post by that person by clicking the dots on the post you don't like. So you got a lot of control to limit what you see there. But yeah, it is a free-for-all out there. It's a mosh pit these days,
Yeah,
which is too bad. I want to mention just an experience I had leading into a question about mystery. When I first decided to write some straight crime, in addition to my speculative fiction, I bought a book bundle of 10 mystery novels from a publisher specializing in mystery novels. And I read those 10 books. 2 of them were straight crime. The rest were science fiction, fantasy, and even Western. And so I was then wondering what readers are looking for. Now that I've read these mystery novels, a author in Canmore, his name escapes me at the moment. I remembered it just a while ago, but it escapes me right now. I read one of his books, and he had a ghost helping his hero solve murders, and he was a mystery writer, a crime writer. And I'm going, well, mystery has changed since I was a kid. I used to watch Agatha Christie on TV and read her books. What is mystery today as a genre? I mean, apparently we're all writing mysteries because we're including content that kind of fall under that marketing category now. But in your mind, how do you define mystery?
Well, I can sort of jump in on that because this book, which I forget when it was, The Witch Doctor's Bones, this one I thought I'm going to write an Agatha Christie style mystery. This is what I am going to do. And it was set in Namibia and South Africa. 18 tourists get on a bus, and by the end of the trip, there are less of them. And this was probably one of the hardest books that I've ever written. Again, because like the time travel, I had to be quite purist about it. And I think that was the one because I work very closely with Inanna Publications. And that one went back to the drawing board. I think it was 3 times that I had to rework it. And they sent me sort of, 3 long PDFs of feedback and, had to completely rework the thing. And so writing this genre, because I'd say that's the most genre novel that I have on the table, was really, really difficult because I had to kind of stick to it quite strictly. So that's been my closest experience with trying to write the actual mystery.
Anyway, okay. One of the reasons I started, of course, I love mysteries anyway, and as Lisa mentioned, the Bloody Words Mystery Conference, I started that way back in '99, and because I love mystery so much. And I used to go to a lot of conventions and learned a great deal, but they were all in the States. There weren't any at that point. There weren't any mystery conventions in Canada. And I kept telling friends, well, why don't you go? You should go to these wonderful conventions. And they said, well, it's too far away. I can't go. I spend that time from work. It's too expensive, blah, blah, woof, woof. So I thought, okay, I'll start one here. And they certainly did. But anyway, back to the question. When I started to write, I basically figured all you had to do, this is me way back, let me tell you, all you had to do was write this about interesting people, because characters are what I start with, and it'll be fine. Well, of course, it wasn't fine because the interesting people were just not sort of wandering around chatting and not getting anywhere. So I finally realized, okay, we really need more structure here. And one of the ways to get structure is to use a genre structure. And so I did, I think my first mystery was Drag Queen in the Court of Death, which was in the running for a Lando Literary Award. And it was very useful, I discovered, to have this structure that made me follow certain steps to get things happening. And it was, I was very happy with that book. And it's been reprinted several times, so obviously by different publishers, so obviously other people liked it too. And it was very helpful for me. I didn't stick with it, of course, because that's me. I just don't stick with one thing. So I did experiment with all sorts of other things, but I always come back to mystery. And I don't happen to have a copy of that book because it's out of print now, but this one is A Friend of Mr. Nijinsky, which is a historical, which takes place in 1915. And as Lisa was telling us about her first mystery, I will never do another historical. It's so long. Although I thought I knew enough about the period, I did, but I have to have specific things. It took off and on almost 10 years. Now, mind you, I would put it away for a while and all that sort of thing. And so people sort of ask you, how long does it take to write a book? Well, from 10 years to 1, depending on the book, you know. But it is very useful to be able to have this structure of usually a murder and somebody who gets pulled into finding out what happens about it. And so it helps to, it's a skeleton to sort of hang things on, I find, so.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I was thinking about the question while you were both speaking, and I very much agree that it is a skeleton to hang your story on. But I think in terms of marketing, we tend to conflate the marketing category with the actual work a little more than our publishers and retailers do anyway, perhaps more than we should. A murder mystery written today set in 1915 versus a murder mystery that was written in 1915 in a lot of ways are going to be very similar books. We're talking about the setting and the story. You can set a mystery structured story in any setting and it's going to work, but it won't be sold as a mystery. You could write a mystery set in a high-tech science fiction setting or a low-tech rural fantasy setting, and it's the same. You could write the exact same story with the exact same characters and story beats, but just hang a different dressing on it, and it will be sold in a completely different category, but it's the same story.
I don't agree it would be the same story, because people from 1915, whatever it was, do not react the way people do today.
I'll agree with that as well. Really, whether we do it consciously or not, we are writing for the current market. What are people today looking for? Because essentially we're looking for the same thing. Today, character is probably the most important aspect of any novel. It wasn't always, but it is today. And for me as a reader, it is as well as an author. So 1915, I know in science fiction, character wouldn't even been thought of as being important to the genre. It's all about idea, not about character.
Yes, but that's not in regular books. Were not like that. I mean,
No.
it's very specific. All this character stuff in science fiction is fairly recent. No.
Yeah, I would make a guess that a 1915 mainstream literature was all about the life experience.
Yes, well, that's another thing. It took me so long because I read several books that were published in that year.
Ah, and what were they? And what was their focus?
Well, one of them, one of the most well-known one, was The Magnificent Ambersons, which is basically about a family who sort of rose and fell, as it were. So it was kind of a family thing, and it was very interesting. And then I can't remember the other one that I read, so obviously it wasn't quite as great. But They weren't genre books.
But were they about life experience? That was kind of what
Yes.
their focus was on how
Well, the relationship
characters
with the
experience
father,
life.
and all this kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah.
So the characterization was very important.
So most mystery involves murder. What about mystery that isn't murder related? How's that doing? Is it something people are looking for today? You know, a mystery novel or a crime novel that does not include somebody dying. Do you think that's actually popular?
Not for me. It's got to be a body. I like killing them off.
Sorry. Most definitely, because most of my books are, I would say, more even psychological thrillers. There's not that often actually in my books a dead body, and sometimes if there is, then for example, in Between the Cracks She Fell, there was a body, but it was actually a very, very minor part of the story. It was more it was more a suspense thriller. See, Chris, I mustn't use words like sort of. I must be definite about these things. It's a suspense thriller, a character-based suspense thriller. And that was probably one of my most popular books that people like. Then there was The Nearly Girl, which was actually, again, there was a body, but it played a minor role. The main character was actually a deranged psychiatrist who'd invented this therapy called Do the Opposite Thing, DTOT. And that was a really fun book to write, actually. It was really quite a funny one. So it was more, I mean, that one, you see, they're also very, very different. It's hard to, describe them. So that there you have The Nearly Girl. There was a body, but sort of incidental. And again, that one was really a very popular book. So for me personally, and then even in The Rage Room, people die, but then they don't die. Exactly. So I hope that's going to do okay. No, you see, Chris, I'm being too hesitant. I hope that's going to do really well. So, but yeah, so for me, the body is kind of not even a secondary character. It's just sort of helps the plot along.
It's like a prop.
It's a prop. It's a prop.
The body is a very active prop.
Yes.
So I can imagine reading a heist book where there's no dead body, but there's a really intricate crime that has to be solved. I would read that.
Good.
You see, in mysteries, there tend to be subgenres, and heist is one of them, and capers, and in capers and heists, you don't have necessarily bodies unless somebody gets a little careless with the gun. But apart from that, it's not about who's dying and finding out that. It's one of the subgenres.
Yeah, definitely.
But I see there's a question on our chat about, and it mentioned justice and whether or not there's justice. And I would say that justice plays a very, very large role in all of my books. Justice, vindication are probably two of the main driving themes in the book. All the books, really. Justice for the individual, societal justice. So justice is very important to me, maybe because I don't see enough of it in the world.
As I said, for me as a reader, I enjoy fiction with justice in it because it is absent in the world. There's so much injustice out there. I want to escape to a novel that addresses justice, and justice prevails. And I think a lot of like-minded people out there as well that are looking for a better life experience in their fiction than they're experiencing in real life. Like Caro.
Yes, I just want to say that, one of the main reasons to read, and presumably to write, mystery, genre, or crime fiction, is to bring the world back into a sort of an even balance, so that justice of some sort has been meted out, usually. Sometimes the bad guy gets away and that sort of thing, but usually the idea is to, and certainly in my books, to mete some sort of justice out to whoever it was who did the horrible thing. Certainly in the book that I'm writing now, which is one of the Merculian books, hopefully the last one. I really must write about real people for a while. But I'm having some trouble trying to mete out justice to this bad guy who seems to be awfully clever and trying to get away all the time, so I have to stop him. But I think that's part of when you start a mystery, no matter how gruesome and gory and horrible it gets, you sort of know, well, this guy is getting so bad, I hope there's going to be something ghastly happen to him in the end, and he gets his, and you sort of think that it's probably going to happen.
Well, I'm thinking that even in other genres that are not mystery or crime related, people are looking for justice. And in a romance, you want the characters to get what they deserve. You want the boy and girl to get together, and the third wheel who's causing problems to get punted. You're looking for justice no matter what genre you're reading, right?
Well, that's one way to look at it, I guess.
Like I say, in fiction, I'm trying to find a world that's bigger than the real world, but is ultimately more fair. So the stakes may be a lot higher in my fiction, but I actually want things to turn out in the end to be more fair than they actually do in real life. So yeah, very, very strange.
And I'm not sure about you guys, but often I find myself becoming really quite attached to my evil antagonists. I find they're very interesting characters, and you can actually have a lot more fun with them as a writer by, exploring their deviant ways. And so I get a lot of kicks out of my nasty antagonists, and yeah, I feel kind of sad when at the end, something has to happen to them. So,
well, and sometimes you find the reader wanting the bad guy to win. It's maybe easier if you don't have a string of dead bodies behind him, but sometimes that agent of chaos, the reader wants them to prevail in the end, and maybe that is justice as well, depending on the situation in the story. I'm thinking like the Thomas Crown Affair, or even maybe a show like Breaking Bad. You wanted Walter White to win in the end. You were rooting for him because he had been so badly wronged in the beginning that every bad thing he did along the way was him seeking justice or restitution in some way.
Well, a good villain is the hero of their own story.
Oh, any villain has to be the hero of their own story.
And their backstory has to be presented in such a way that the reader goes, I understand why they are who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are looking for them to succeed in some way.
Yep. If not, you've written a Saturday morning cartoon villain from the 1980s. He's sitting there twirling his mustache, wanting to rule the world for no reason whatsoever. And that guy's not interesting to read about.
No. Caro, I saw your hand.
Goodness, now I forgot what I was going to say because of what you were saying. Oh yes, about the villains. I think a lot of it depends on the point of view that you're using to tell the story. You mentioned Breaking Bad, which I actually haven't seen, but as I understand it, this is from that character's point of view. So therefore, you know how he thinks about things and what happened to him. But if it isn't from, my particular bad guy at the moment, you never get his point of view. You're never inside his head. And so all you're seeing is the absolutely horrible thing that he did that got everybody so upset. And I don't know. I'm not going to have any trouble whatsoever knocking this guy off or whatever it is I'm going to do with him. Expelling him, I think, to some horrible place. So I think a lot depends on how close you are to the villain, to finding out about him.
From our chat here, the topic of setting was brought up. Setting your story somewhere different than where you are. Now, Caro, you got a whole different world for a lot of your fiction. But often I like to read a story set somewhere else. I like to read a story set in Europe, or set in Egypt, or set in Singapore. And I find that helps enhance the mystery. It's a setting that I'm not fully familiar with. And so the author can invoke all sorts of interesting little mystery things going on, and in an educational way. about those settings. Do any of you? Well, Caro, you've got a new world, but and Chris, I imagine your setting is world built as well. But do you like writing in other settings than the one you grew up in?
Oh, definitely. But like my novel is set in 1880s Halifax, Nova Scotia, which I had never set foot in that city before I started writing the novel. I did a lot of research. I read a lot of histories of the city and Nova Scotia and Canada at the time. And I basically had chosen it because I wanted to set it in a Canadian city that had been well established by the 1880s. So I almost picked it at random, and then I did a lot of the research, and there's a lot of fascinating history in Halifax. And then what I did was I dropped wizards in to the equation and just kind of it branched off into its own setting in a lot of ways. But like I say, I had never been there before I started writing it, and the research was interesting, but exploring it through the writing was even more fascinating to me anyway.
Well, different place, different time, that's exotic, right?
Yep. Yep.
Lisa, how about you?
I love writing about other places, and this book, sorry, I'm always flashing my books around, but unlike Chris, I don't have the sort of witty sentences in my head, so I need to lean upon the book. So this one was set in Australia, and it's because obviously, or not obviously, all my family and I live in Australia. So we would go there, my husband and I go there every 2 years. And the book started as based on an incident where I thought my husband had fallen off the Sydney Harbour ferry into the rolling waters. And actually, of course, he hadn't. I had completely missed the stop, being the daydreamer that I am. But the thing was then, because I lived in Australia for 2 years, so I kind of thought it would be easy, to set a novel in Australia. But I did a lot of research, because then I set it in Apollo Bay, where I had briefly visited, because I loved the name, right? Apollo Bay. So it had to be worked in, and Melbourne. And then I needed there to be little surrounding towns, and I needed to calculate the distance of, how long it would take for him to drive from Sydney to Melbourne, all these sorts of things. So I ended up knowing so much more. Much to my chagrin and embarrassment, when the book was sort of close to publication, they were fact-checking it. I got some of the ferry name stops wrong. How could I do that? I'd taken those ferries for 2 years. So thank heavens for fact-checkers and editing down the line. But I learned so much about a land that I'd lived in for 2 years by writing about it, So it turned out to be a lot more work than I thought, but also a lot more fun.
You reminded me of a research problem I have. During the first draft, I'm doing all sorts of research about a location. And then when I'm doing the last draft, I do some fact checking and discover the facts have changed.
Yeah.
It's the first draft.
Yeah.
This place is closed, or it changed its name, or their menu totally changed. I had a restaurant, and it was alcohol free when I did my first draft. And when I did my last draft, they were featuring fruity drinks. So, Carol, how about you? For a location?
Well, I have set stories, and this one that I mentioned before is in New York, of course, New York City, which I have visited many times. So I felt, I had the feel of the place. Of course, I do a lot of research because it was a little before my time. And but a lot of my books are set in Toronto. I like reading books set in cities that I know well. And so that now they're not usually set now. They're usually back a bit because of, for instance, Drag Queen, The Court of Death is set in the early 80s because it involves the early AIDS situation and that sort of thing. It comes in because that's important for the story. So there's that. And I have another book, which is not a book yet, but it is in manuscript form still. It is in a small village in New Brunswick, where I used to go when I was very young. We had a cottage down there in the Bay of Fundy. So, they're all places I know. Unlike Chris, I don't think I could write about a place I hadn't actually been. I just don't feel sort of too happy about that idea. I have to sort of feel it and smell it and all that sort of thing. But anyway, that's just me. Let's see, where else have I set things? Well, I guess that's just about it. I think there are some short stories which I have set in, Quebec City and Montreal, both the places I've been fairly often. So that's sort of it for me. And otherwise, it's my own little world, which, and even that gets annoying because, of course, there are 5 books, and I'm on the 6th one now. And of course, I forget what happened earlier. And I discover, luckily, I have a first reader who's very keen-eyed, that, wait a minute, wasn't that called something else back in book 2? Well, I don't know. So, here's a bit of problem, even when you make up your own world, because I am not organized like a lot of science fiction writers who seem to sort of build the world first. I didn't think it was going to be a series, so I didn't do that. I just wrote the book, which actually was book 2 now. Anyway, so that's it for me.
We've only got a couple minutes left.
Oh goodness, we do.
I'm gonna put out a last call for questions on chat, and while we wait to see if something comes in, I have news here. The next Twitter pitch wars we talked about pitching through Twitter is on September 3rd.
Oh.
So if anybody's got a manuscript they want to pitch, check out Twitter on September 3rd. It'll get very busy with the pitch wars.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say about that, do not pitch an incomplete project.
No.
If you're still pending revisions or waiting for feedback from your writing group, don't pitch it yet, because when someone requests to see it, they want to see it. It has to be ready to go.
Has to be done.
Yeah, good point.
I don't see any questions coming up. Lisa, you had a comment.
Well, I just wanted to mention that with regard to writing about places that you haven't actually been to, that the internet, sometimes I feel almost creepy, because using, Google Maps and Worldview, and even if you just type in a keyword, I mean, I've come across some extremely strange people, activities. For example, in the occult persuasion and the anarchist solution, there's a guy who's into eco-eroticism, and this is where you have relations with plants, and this was something that I think I stumbled across quite by accident, by just random search.
I hope so.
Sure you did. Sure you did.
Something I search for all the time.
I did not type in, I promise, hashtag eco-eroticism, but, just looking for, so I find, I said I had a town in Germany, in a glittering chaos that I knew nothing about, and I basically lined my entire study with pictures that I printed out of the highway, the house, what I thought the woman looked like. So I feel like I can almost virtually travel anywhere. I mean, I know it's not the same, and I had been to Wiesbaden, so I used my Wiesbaden experience and then springboarded off there. So, but yeah, sometimes I almost feel a little weirded out by the things I come across.
Just one more bit of news here. Hashtag WWC_Calgary for Twitter. Catherine's going to post more information about the pitches on Twitter. Just search for that hashtag. You'll get festival information on Twitter. Okay, I think we're out of time here. I'd like to thank everybody. This has been a fantastic conversation. Shall we do it again next year? Continue it?
I would love to.
Sounds great.
I would really love to.
I'd really
I'm gonna wow Chris with my 2 sentences.
I'm looking forward to them. You got a year to boil them down.
That's right. We got to come back with our quickie writing descriptions.
Yeah.
idea.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. Not just our panelists, but our audience as well. And have fun for the rest of the day. See what else is out there. Enjoy the weekend, folks.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
See you later, guys.